But the reality is, first we got to acknowledge just how much we've been going through. So I want you to give yourself permission right now. Are you overwhelmed with your life right now? If so, then stay tuned for a minute, because I want to rap with you about that. First of all, I'm going to be straight up. I really don't want to say what I'm about to share with you right now. There's a part of me that feels like it's going to be perceived as weak. There's a part of me that feels like if I talk too much about this, it's going to create more of that stress and overwhelm in my life. And the reality is that I am not used to speaking about stress and overwhelm out loud. But the reason I'm doing it today is because I know I'm not alone in that. Even though I've spoken about this in some confidential containers and shared more of myself than I ever thought I would in men's circles all over the world, I know that saying this out loud is there's a much greater reach that this is going to have. But I'm willing to do it because I know I'm not the only one. In fact, I believe right now in the world that you listening to this, you're probably experiencing some degree of stress or overwhelm in your life. It's tough. Life is difficult. I know the way that I was raised, I was really well prepared for certain aspects of life, but when it comes to challenge and adversity, specifically around providing for my family as a man and just having some sense of certainty and confidence about where I'm going in my life, that's something I've had to figure out largely as an adult. And I see other men trying to figure that out for themselves too. And it often leads to doubt and fear and uncertainty and periods of overwhelm and stress. Especially in this past year when we've been dealing with crazy amounts of unknowns, events and circumstances that we probably thought we never were going to have to ever face. And yet here we are, living in a world that is completely different than it used to look like over a year ago. Just a year ago, just 1 year. Things have changed so much. Things have changed in the way that we create an income for ourselves, the places that we live in. I mean, how many of you guys right now are living in a place that is different from when the pandemic started, are doing a job or making the majority of your income doing something different than when the pandemic started, in a different relationship? Maybe you're a father or a parent now when you weren't before the pandemic started. Those 4 things are major life events. Now, when was the last time that you sat down and just acknowledged how much you've actually been through in the past year? Or even just the past 3 months, or the past week? When was the last time that you looked at that and said, dang, I've been going through some stuff recently? Because that was the moment I had. Recently, I took a full audit and review of my life over the past 3 months, and it was enough, not just for a year, but like for 5 years, right? My family and I going through a full month of quarantine after we all contracted COVID. My life in supporting my sister-in-law after she had an injury and we had to take care of her for a week. My life and how it changed when a really dear, beloved friend, brother, sibling passed away unexpectedly. The changes in the financial climate, the circumstances surrounding where myself and my family are going to live in the near future. So much. And all of this has happened since the 2nd week in April. I'm recording this today. It's the last week in July. And we're talking about just over 3 months. Just over 3 months. All of these things have happened to me. Now, I looked at that for a moment and said, wow, if that was somebody else and I was reflecting that back to them, I'd say, man, you've been through a lot of stuff. And that's just the highlights. That's not to mention raising 2 children and continuing to grow a business and being the leader of a movement and taking on new positions and roles within the organization of Rising Men. So much. And surviving, being in a relationship with my wife, getting ready to celebrate 7 years of marriage. It's a lot. And I definitely don't give myself credit for how much I'm going through. And so on the days and the mornings where I wake up and my heart is pounding out of my chest with anxiety of the things that I have to do today, when I'm waking up in the middle of the night or I can't even go to bed because there's so much on my mind, one of the most calming things to think about is how much other people are going through. And actually connecting, not just thinking about it in theory, but talking to other people, especially the men and the brothers that I have in my life, about what they're going through. Because one thing that happens, and maybe you can relate to this, is when you're going through stress and overwhelm, the last thing that you're likely to do is think about other people and their circumstances. All of a sudden, the fear, the uncertainty, and doubt starts to collapse my world inside of itself. Like I'm imploding, and all of the problems and all of the challenges I'm facing, I can't possibly consider those of others. This is a really simple first step, but it's instrumental in helping me to pull myself out of it. Let me consider what the world is like for somebody else for a moment. Not that I want to relish in anybody else's challenges or sorrows, but to recognize that, whoa, I'm not the only person who's going through some hard stuff right now. And in fact, when me and my bro can sit down and talk about the hard things we're going through, yes, there's opportunity to commiserate a little bit and empathize with each other, but it also alleviates some of the burden that we're carrying so that we can expand our view again. I can start to think outside of what I'm feeling as far as stress goes and move more towards solutions instead of letting that stress and overwhelm compound on top of me and start to crush me. And how many times have you felt that? I know I feel it all the time, but instead I can move through it. I can take that first chunk out of the pile of overwhelm and handle it, get rid of it. Start moving towards what I need to do. Be more solution-minded, more solution-oriented. But the reality is, first we got to acknowledge just how much we've been going through. So I want you to give yourself permission right now. If you need to pause this episode, or if you need to finish it up and then take a 5, 10, 20-minute chunk for yourself, just sit down and take a review. Start with the past week. Maybe you go to a month, or the last 3 months, the last season of your life, or just the past year. Maybe go back to when the pandemic started. That's a really good milestone for all of us, right? And just take an inventory of all the things that you've been through. Now, this is not an exercise in feeling bad for yourself or feeling sorry for what's happened, but just look at it and pretend that you're looking at someone else's life. And notice how much compassion you can have when you look at this in a more objective way. Because if this was anybody else going through this stuff, you would have way more understanding, way more compassion, and way more empathy than you probably have for yourself. Again, you don't need to start feeling bad for yourself, but just acknowledge what you've been through. Acknowledge what you're currently going through. Sometimes we dismiss these big things that are happening to us as small. We fail to acknowledge them. And the risk of that is that we glance right over it, and all it does is just fester and boil for another day. On the contrary, sometimes we blow things up way out of proportion, and then we get stuck in the mud of the explosion. Somewhere in the middle is an opportunity to acknowledge what we're going through, but then also to not make it so large, and to be able to move through it, to move towards solutions, to move towards new possibilities and surrender. Because the reality is, if you haven't heard it by now, you are going to go through some stuff, some challenges, some adversity in order to survive on this planet. Sometimes it's going to be losing a loved one. Sometimes it's going to be an unexpected financial expense that comes up that you're not ready for. Sometimes you're going to get evicted from your house. Sometimes they're going to elect a politician that you don't agree with. Whatever it is, there's going to be moments of challenge and adversity at varying degrees for the rest of your life. So we have to learn how to deal with these, not get sunk by them. And one of the best ways to do it is to be transparent about what we're going through by first taking an inventory within ourselves and then sharing that with somebody else. Guarantee you, if you share openly from that space with somebody who can really understand that and really receive it, that you're going to find that you're not alone. And some of that burden, I'm not saying all of it's going to go away, but some of that burden you're holding is going to decrease. In fact, right after I finish this recording, I'm jumping on the phone with a bro of mine. And I promise you, I'm going to be sharing with him the enormity of the overwhelm I've been experiencing. And because I know this guy, I know he's going to say, dude, me too. I get it. Even if he's not there right now, he'll say, I've been there before. I know what you're going through. You got this. You can figure it out. Let's sit down. Let's look at it. What do you need to do? What's the first step that you need to take? The only way we get that is by looking at it honestly and starting to pick it apart. Being transparent about our experience with somebody else. So all this message was intended for is to give you that moment to shake yourself out of your overwhelm and your stress and your anxiety that I am feeling, that you are feeling, that so many of us are feeling right now, long enough to appreciate it from the outside. Take an objective viewpoint and share that with somebody else. Share that with somebody that you trust. And then see how you feel. I guarantee you that the weight of that load is going to feel just a little bit lighter, knowing that you're not the only one who has to carry it, knowing that you're not the only one who knows about the load that you've been carrying around. And if you know somebody else, maybe you're not feeling crushed by your overwhelm and stress right now, but you know somebody who is, please share this message with them so that they can hear it, so they can get that moment of getting snapped out of their coherence long enough to feel some of that relief. Because as soon as that load feels just a little bit lighter and we can take that first step forward, pick ourselves up and get walking again, then we start to move towards resolution, start to move towards growth, and we start to move towards courage and strength. And that's what I want for all of you guys. So share this message up with someone who needs to hear it. Make sure you tune in each and every week for our Monday morning meditations here on the Rising End podcast. And until next week, stay blessed, stay loved, and take it easy.